Why wasn't Israel to sacrifice blemished animals to God? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, can turn to Deuteronomy chapter 17. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 7. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 17, beginning at verse 1. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God a bull or a sheep which has any blemish or defect, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is any found among you within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you, a man or a woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Lord your God in transgressing his covenant, who has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or the moon or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it is told you, and you hear it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has committed that wicked thing, and shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. Whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall put away the evil from among you. So far in the 3rd section of Deuteronomy, we've been reintroduced to the 10 Commandments, had a lengthy discussion about why Israel wasn't to serve idols, been shown that God would select a place for Israel to worship, unlike the Canaanites who worshipped everywhere, expected Israel to keep the pilgrimage feasts in the spring and the fall, as well as install just judges to judge the people. Coming now to chapter 17, we get further instructions about sacrifices and idolatry. At the end of chapter 16, we noted that Israel wasn't to set up idols to the goddess Asherah, one of the gods of the Canaanites. She was usually worshipped with sacred poles or stylized trees. In verse 1 of chapter 17, we also find that Israel wasn't to offer blemished or defected sacrifices to God. Why? Well, Moses said here that it is an abomination, but why is it an abomination? For that, we need to remember the character of God as revealed to us in Leviticus. God is a holy God. The things offered to God are to be holy. The word itself is used 95 times in 78 different verses in Leviticus in the New King James Version of the Bible. For something to be considered holy, it must be blameless, without spot or defect. So if Israel was going to offer a defective animal to God, they were offering something unholy. They weren't reverencing the holy nature of God. In short, they were disrespecting God. Up until this point in Deuteronomy, God has in numerous places shown Israel how he had blessed them or would bless them if they kept his commandments. That meant that God would bless their herds and grow them abundantly. In order for herds to be able to grow in this way, the animals that are born must be in healthy condition. For if you got a bunch of sickly animals, your herds wouldn't grow hardly at all. So in light of this, Israel would have plenty of unblemished animals to offer to God that would not only show their respect for God, but their thankfulness to him for what he had done for them. Coming out of verse 2, what would happen to those in Israel if they went after and served other gods, whether they be false gods of the sun, moon, stars, planets, or any other thing? Well, it was first to be properly investigated, and if evidence is found that the allegations of idol worship was true, the man or the woman was to be put to death by stoning. We've seen this spoken of before in our studies of Deuteronomy, but it is further elaborated on here. In order for the death penalty in Israel to be exacted, it had to be based on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, this doesn't mean that 2 or 3 different people needed to actually see the event, for a witness could also be evidence that was obtained. For instance, a person could have heard you say that you were worshiping Baal, and that upon investigation an idol of Baal was found in your house. That would be 2 witnesses. You could thus be put to death. Obviously, the more witnesses there are, the better. But the point is, there was due process in Israel, unlike what some think occurred in Israel today. And due process wasn't always present among the ancients, and it is still not universal today. So the Deuteronomy really was ahead of its time in regards to how justice was to be meted out, is another sign that the book was from God and not the work of man. When it came to actually killing the person who was sentenced to death, the first witness who brought the charge was the first to cast the stones, followed by the rest of the people of the city, for rooting out idolatry was to be important enough for all to be involved. Now there were laws against false witnesses under the law of Moses that would have resulted in the death penalty for those that lied in a capital case. This high penalty provided some safeguards and some deterrence to lying in court, though it would not prevent it entirely if the people as the whole left God as their standard. If it were to happen, though, and someone died unjustly, rest assured, God's judgment will be harsh on those who do not repent of their sin. We'll continue with chapter 17, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.